Well, hey everyone, it's Hudson. I'm here with my brand new Z7 in my yard here between my studio and my house in Portland, Oregon. First day of spring. When you watch this, I'm actually going to be in South Carolina setting up to run a 5-day workshop in Charleston. We're going to do a bunch of birds. It's going to be a ton of fun. And in this approach in the scene, I want to talk a little bit about a serious problem that I have with the Nikon Z cameras. I love them enough to have bought both a Z6 and a Z7. I think the viewfinder is amazing. They're a wonderful camera to handhold and shoot in low light. The performance is fantastic with everything except tracking really fast motion, as I've discussed in a previous video. And this one problem that occurs when doing, the refined landscape image. It's about depth of field preview, and I'll explain it in just a second here. I've had a lot of questions about it since I did my rants and raves, and I want to make a video that just really showcases this problem and call on everyone who cares to talk to Nikon about it. I don't hear anyone else talking about it. I think the Z6 and the Z7 are absolutely phenomenal cameras for low light and landscape work, particularly the Z7 in the landscape. Makes a ton of sense for getting into inaccessible, hard to reach places. This one thing is a really simple, easy to fix problem that I think Nikon just oversaw and a lot of people haven't even thought about. But for me, it's a big deal, because one of the things that I love ever since I've had live view on my DSLR, so the Nikon D700 or D310, I don't remember which one, D300S on, that has a good live view. I thought it was just like cheating to be able to zoom into 100% at the chosen aperture and see whether your background and foreground are in focus. It makes a depth of field, app like a hyperfocal distance app just obsolete. It makes having to memorize scales or have scales on lenses obsolete. You can just see. My first thing when I set up in the landscape is flip to manual focus. Go look at those distant mountains at 100% in the viewfinder and just start back focusing closer and closer till they really come out of focus to an unacceptable place, and focus back to where they're sharp enough. And I know I'm at hyperfocal distance at that aperture. Then I can check the foreground. If it's not sharp enough, I can stop down or think about focus blending or focus stacking or choosing a different lens. But that's just not possible with this camera in photo mode. And the reason is that, if I'm here, I'm going to flip into manual or autofocus so you can see where the point that I'm actually working with here. I'm going to focus in on this one really close euphorbia bud that I've got here in front of me. And let's open up to let's say 1.8. This is the 50 1.8. That way you can really see the depth of field here wide open. So I'm wide open, 1.8. I've focused in on this one bud right there. And you can see it's a very shallow focus. Now, every other camera out there, the Sonys, the Fujis that I've worked with, my Nikon DSLRs in live view, if I start to stop down, just like this camera, you're going to see the effects of aperture on the image. Everything's coming into sharper focus closer to me and further away from that bud until I hit 5.6. And now watch what happens. As I stop down past f5.6, it doesn't have any effect because the aperture diaphragm is locked at f5.6 on this camera until it actually captures the image. The only way for me to preview what f16 looks like before shooting this image is to hit the program depth of field preview button. For me, that's under my middle finger next to the lens. There you can see, in the full view, fit view image, it stops down. I can see how much of the grass looks to be in focus, how much of the foreground looks to be in focus. Here's the problem. So if I let go of that button, there's no way to lock it. There's no setting in this camera that lets you lock depth of field in. If I decide to tap up here and go check depth of field, and I zoom in, I'll just hit the OK button to go to 100% view. I have that programmed, the center of my D-pad to be 100%. I'm only looking at it at an f5.6 view. If I hit the depth of field preview, it jumps back to a fit view. There's no way to zoom in and see what 100% view of my distant background looks like with the aperture stop down smaller than f5.6. A lot of you may say, well, so what, no big deal. But again, if I'm working on a landscape image and I want to make sure everything from the foreground to the background is in perfect focus, I love the ability to be able to look through this beautiful viewfinder with the diopter adjusted to my eye instead of using reading glasses and looking at the back of my D850 like I'm accustomed to. zoom in and check and get hyperfocal distance perfect. I'd flip into manual focus, and I would just be able to turn that nice big focus ring on this lens until I see those mountains just start to lose sharpness and turn them back till they're sharp. I'm at hyperfocal distance. Boom, I know that. I can't do it on this. And the funny thing is that if you go into video mode, it will keep stopping down past f5.6. You'll see exactly what I mean, you're previewing what you're filming. But, you know, that's the only workaround for me, is to change my video mode, you know, settings to exactly what I want to photograph the image in. So, you know, my base ISO, it might be half a second at f16, and see whether everything's in focus in video mode in a 16:9 view, and then flip back to photo view and make sure that the settings are all synchronized, because it remembers where you were shooting video last, what settings that is. That's a really cool thing. It remembers what your last photo settings were like. That's a really nice thing for those of us who like to shoot video and stills. It's a pain in the butt if you're doing this workaround, because you're constantly trying to synchronize settings that aren't going to be remembered between different shoots. It's not a great workaround. So, you know, I'm just hoping Nikon will please pay attention, and hopefully enough people start talking about this, and just in firmware, at least when we're in manual focus view, let us stop down past f5.6 and zoom in at the same time. I'm sure that the reason that they did this was to try to boost light for the autofocus performance, so that people weren't stopping down, and you know, they're really trying to catch up in the autofocus department. There's a big firmware update coming in May. Maybe that'll fix this, maybe it won't. I'll check back in when that happens. But I'm sure that they were concerned about autofocus performance if the sensor is getting less light with the lens stopped down. But if you flip to manual focus, how about letting us actually stop down? Because in the landscape, I think that you should be focusing in manual focus anyway. Everything should be manual. So that's my little plea to Nikon, and to all of you who care about this stuff. You know, let's ask Nikon to change that in firmware. It should be a simple bit of code to reprogram this thing to allow us to do this. All right. So that's it for this approach in the scene. I am going to be coming to you from South Carolina and Cuba in coming weeks. I got some fun stuff planned while I'm there. Really excited about Cuba. I'm going to have the family with me there and be scouting for a workshop in 2020. So if anybody's stoked or excited about possibly going to Cuba with me in 2020, shoot me an email and I'll make sure you get advance notice about that. All right, everybody, have fun. Keep shooting.